So I joined the Power BI customer advisory team in March this year. And as you can imagine, everybody who works with Power BI is always seeing all those notifications about Power BI, new features, things that happen every month. And to be honest, that experience of having so many new features all the time doesn't feel any different from the other side. Actually, it might even feel more amazing because you see all of the work and effort that is needed and that is spent to actually make all of this available. Of course, I have to say this, I'm paid for it just right now, but no, it's really also my feeling, and I'm very happy to be there. But well, it's the fourth month now, or yeah, something like that, and I just wanted a short recap, or actually I just did a short recap of seeing which of the new features that actually came up after I joined Microsoft have been the most exciting features for me. So let's just have a quick look into this. So quick intro, we already did this, working for Microsoft now. So yeah, as you see, there are a few ones. So first of all the colors, because we have Pride Month this month. So I think the world cannot be colorful enough. So I tried to at least capture a little bit of this in my slides. And also the colors have a kind of classification. So red is for actually the dearest feature I always had, which is data modeling. Green is for data, well, we call it reach. So it's actually like, yeah, making data available. Yellow, the one I actually did talk before, is more the visualization and reporting part. Not my biggest strength, but there have been a lot of really cool features there. Blue is admin. Lilac is, well, let's call it strategy or architecture. And the last one is actually a small surprise. Let's see what actually is there. So let's just dive into everything. Let's start with probably the newest and one of the biggest feature here, which is data marts. I assume many of you have already heard of this new feature, which has been announced during build, like some of the others. So what is data marts? If I would try to put it in a few words, I would say it's a kind of self-service approach for data warehouse development. So it is something you always could do. So you could always consider a data set as a kind of data mart. So this is like a part of the data that is available in your large enterprise data warehouse with business logic applied to it. And you always had data flows as your ETL tool, but data marts is actually like an easier way to bring all of this functionality together. So what is it you can do with data marts? You can select some source data. You can use Power Query, actually Power Query online, like you did with data flows, to extract and transform this data. The result is stored. One of the new features and amazing features here is the result is not stored in Azure Data Lake storage like it was before, but now in Azure SQL. You can define measures and relationships in your data mart. So meaning you have a web editor to define relationships, to write measures. And as on top of this data mart, which is actually the result of your data flow with some business logic added to it, a direct query mode dataset is automatically created, which allows you to automatically create reports on top of this. So it's like you start with the data flow, and when you're done with the data flow, you have everything ready to really start just creating your reports. And what you can do with the result is you can create reports against the dataset. You can use the dataset and create other datasets on top of it. Or you can create completely new data sets based on the SQL endpoint, which is actually the outcome of your data flow in combination with the measures and relationships. And that is something which we really should look into and really try and create together. Let's see if it works. Of course, to be sure, I prepared something. And now I have so many windows open that I have to find the proper one. So first of all, this is just my demo tenant. Data marts is a premium feature, as is to be expected. At least during the test phase, it's also available in premium per user. It's a really new preview feature. It will be in preview for quite a time. There will be updates to this feature, like, for example, it was with direct query over analysis services and Power BI datasets. So there is a lot of changes and new features to be expected for the future. And about the final licensing, if it's premium per user, premium per capacity, whatever. I don't want to actually talk about this during the call. We really talk about the functionality, but that's what we want to look at. So we need a premium per user or premium per capacity workspace. And what you can do here now is you can just create a new data mart. What you're getting is you're entering a kind of a new dialogue, which didn't take that long the last time, okay, which is more or less like a Power Query online dialogue. So you can either get data or enter data. You already have some data sources already highlighted, and I will just do a very quick part, which is using an Excel file from OneDrive. One other thing which is really noticeable, which is another new feature, is you don't have only the opportunity to connect to an Excel file. You can use the same dialog to actually upload a local file to OneDrive for Business in the same step, which is also quite interesting. In this case, we'll just take an already existing file from OneDrive for Business. On the other screen, there was just my sign-in dialog. I'll just take a very simple Adventure Works demo. You can set up a gateway connection if required. In this case, as I'm taking from OneDrive for Business, that's not required. And you're in your Power Query dialog choosing the tables from your Excel. So nothing really new, really something which we are used to doing. Now we can transform the data, and again, Power Query Online. Looks pretty nice, it's pretty snappy and quick. And of course, Power Query Online approvals are also part of the whole story. What we could do here is apply transformations, whatever. This is the whole Power Query Online part. I think this is nothing really new. So I'll just skip this. And the interesting part is what is going to happen after I save this? Because until now, everything, to me at least, looks more or less like a data flow. No? And if I now press save, what you see is a completely different window. So you see all the steps that are actually happening in the background. You get a much more detailed information, what is happening right now. And you see we have the processing of the Power Query, the rules are created, we have relationships. So if you, for example, you would connect to a SQL database and having foreign key constraints enabled on your tables, the system would already try and identify potential relationships. Then you have the actual data load part, and then you have a wrap-up. You can already go to the workspace before everything is done. In this case, you would see the data mart, and I will get back to this view later on. You would actually see the data mart with a warning sign that says that the data mart is not ready to use until the full wrap-up has actually been done. One thing which happens quite often to me, because I'm not working with data marts that often, is that I forget to rename it before I do the whole thing, which leads to those really, really unfriendly names. Just to show you how easily that could have been avoided before. And just to make this experience a bit better, is you can actually, in the creation dialog, just go click on the title and change this to something useful. So, and the same name would have been kept for the data set as well. It doesn't change anything about the functionality, it just looks better. Okay, so what we have here is this new artifact called data mart. That wasn't a good idea. So let me just remove the last one. Sorry, just cleaning up before I click on the wrong things. I know why I prepare some things. So we have the data mart itself, and we have the data set that is connected against the data mart. Let's just keep this. So when we are looking at the data set, we see the typical data set details view. We don't see anything like file, download the PBIX or anything. This is something which is not possible. It's automatically created, and there is no way to actually edit this automatically created data set. That is especially because there is some lineage between the data set and the data mart. So if you're changing the structure of the data mart, the data set will be adjusted accordingly. So this is another very important difference to your current data flow data set experience, because a lot of you probably already experienced, you're adjusting a data flow, adding a column, removing a column, I don't know, something like that. And afterwards, you had to actually open your Power BI data set connected to this data flow in Power BI desktop, do a refresh of the metadata, publish everything again. That's something which is not necessary here. That's another thing we just want to look into. Just to mention, we have all the tables already available. And what if we want, we can now create a report from scratch. And in this report, we can, for example, say we want to see our sales amount by, I don't know, customer, country, region, for example. We just make a table out of it. It's nothing really useful. So what we see is we see our sales amount, we see the country region, we see the same amount for everything. Looks like typical thing. We don't have a relationship yet. So how do we change this? We just go back to our data mart artifact. This is this one. And now we are already in this kind of web editing view. What we can do here is we can add additional data, additional tables. We can see, and most probably I entered the wrong one. We go to the prepared one. So what you're seeing here right now is the tables we imported. You could go back to the Power Query part and add additional steps, add additional data, enter data. And what you can already see here is what you can do is you can enter a measure. And if you add a measure, you can just do it. So you have a web editor for DAX here. So we could enter a measure called total sales amount equals sum. And you see we have IntelliSense, sales amount. And just, okay, I already created this measure because this is my prep version, but we can just look at the measure and we can see that we can create measures like this, total quantity, whatever. So we have the standard functionality to create measures. The other part, what we can do here is we can create relationships. And how to do this, or if you want to do this, you can see that we have different views similar to what we have in Power BI Desktop. So we have our table view, which allows us a preview of the data and also the possibility to create measures. And we have our modeling view, so same symbol that we know from Power BI Desktop. And here we actually have the possibility to create relationships. What you need to be aware of at the moment is that there is no data check at the moment when you create a new relationship. So depending on from where to where you do the drag and drop, it might be the wrong way around with a many-to-one relationship. So at least at this point in time, please be aware of this and take good care that you set up the relationships properly. So just to redo the example we just did, I will just remove the relationship here. I will go back to my data. Okay. Let me remove the other two data marts and let's hope that this will resolve all the issues. Going back to the data set, creating a new report, saying I want to see total sales amount by customer, country, region as a table. Looks pretty much like what we saw before. So let us save this. And if we're now going back to the data mart and redoing the relationship between customer and sales, so I'm just taking the customer key, performing a connection. And as you can see, as I dragged from the fact table to the dimension table, it's pointing already the right direction, but it could be the other way around. I'm confirming this. And as you saw, I was doing this in the data mart, not in the data set. But now if I go back to the report and do a refresh, you see figures are adjusting. So the relationship I created is automatically transferred to the data set. It would be the same if I would create a new measure or add columns, add tables, whatever. So we have this full functionality here. And as I said, what I can do now, and that is something which we will look into in another demo, is you can also connect to the SQL endpoint from Power BI Desktop, for example. And as I said, this is something which we will look into in another demo. So first of all, data marts, interesting feature. There are a lot of limitations here. I just pasted in the screenshot. We will also have the link to the documentation in the resources tab at the end. But it's definitely something looking into. It might make life of your self-service users who are more advanced to need this to really, for example, experiment with data which is not part of the official enterprise data warehouse so far, much easier, especially if they are used to SQL, because one thing I wanted to show, which I forgot, is you can not only look at the tables and the relationships, you also have a SQL endpoint here, a SQL view, where you can create your own queries, test something, run the queries. In the future, you will also have the possibility to save queries, for example. This is something which is not there yet. But as I said, there's a lot of potential. It allows your customers to create something like this, even though they might not have the permissions to go to Azure portal and create their own Azure SQL database. They don't have the knowledge about setting all of this up, setting permissions and some such. All of this is actually covered in this process. Of course, with all other self-service features, there's also a risk, but it's something which is pretty interesting. From a pricing perspective, the amount of resources you need is, of course, something which depends on the use case. But data marts are just artifacts on your premium capacity, so they will just add up to the consumption, to the resource consumption inside your capacity. So you will need more resources on the capacity, but it's not like you will need to pay extra dollars to achieve these features. It's just another artifact consuming the resources available in your capacity. Just looking at the chat a bit, I completely agree, Fernando. This definitely will be a very interesting topic from governance and administrative, but especially from governance and security standpoint. Okay, coming back to the slides and looking at the next feature. One thing which I remember through all of my BI consultant, developer, whatever career is, people asking, how can I actually integrate my data into PowerPoint? Because that's what a lot of people actually do. How can I use PowerPoint and interact with my data? So what I remember was possible was like taking a screenshot, exporting to Power BI, but the result was always kind of static result. You could paste a screenshot, you could just keep something as it is, but you didn't have any kind of interactivity. And there is something which really changed about this. And but we could just try now to see what the new PowerPoint integration is actually delivering. And for this, I will just switch to my slide deck. So what you're seeing here is the same thing we saw before as a picture, but what we have just right now is an interactive report. So what we could do is we could change the report. We could adjust this, for example, work with slicers and select something different. So we would have the full experience of a Power BI report embedded in our PowerPoint presentation. So I completely agree. That's definitely something business users, especially executives, were waiting for years, asking for time and again. And so I really hope and I really think that this is something which will bring a lot of additional value to a lot of customers. The important thing you need to know is, because we all know that people are asking for something, and when they get this something, they say, well, but how can I actually make sure that data is not changing when I open my presentation next time? So I want to freeze the last thing I had, or something similar. Of course, that is something which we all expect to happen. And here's the opportunity to actually say, you want to, sorry, it's over here, so you can show and hide filter panes, a lot of things, but here you can actually say you want to show it as a saved image. So actually you can reconsider after you included the embedded part, and you can set your filters accordingly. At the end of the meeting, you can say, use as a saved picture, and you will actually conserve the state that it was in. You cannot go back to interactive afterwards. So you would need to actually add another slide and include it interactive again, but it at least allows you to conserve a certain state. So let me go back to the presentation and the next part. Another live demo, and I need to speed up a little bit. One thing which is really interesting and allows you to get a lot of flexibility. And I will quickly show it. And I will also really point out to the blog post of Gerhard Brückel, a really, really great MVP who experienced with field parameters to actually allow you to find a better workaround for something which is really a challenge for a lot of us, meaning using translation of data, not only metadata, but really of data inside Power BI, And if you are facing this issue, I can really recommend to read this blog post and look into Gerhard's example. So what are field parameters? Field parameters are solving a paradigm that we are discussing for a time. So when we are creating a report, we normally set up visuals in a certain state. So we say, those are the categories we're using in that visual. Those are the measures we need. But pretty often we have requirements from our business users that are actually saying, well, I need this page and I need it for category A, B, and C. And I need it for actuals and for forecast and for budget. And what we're doing there so far is creating either bookmarks, switching between this, or we could use the personalization approach in the service, which allows users to actually change measures and categories on their report page. But this would, on the one hand, require the viewers to do it by themselves. It could lead to completely different results, and they would need to do it visual by visual. And field parameters allow you to actually set up exactly this example. So what you are creating with field parameters is exactly what it says, a parameter which allow you to select certain fields which become interchangeable in the report. And you can set them up in the report as a slicer. And by this, the user in the report can select a value from the slicer. And for example, all the visuals where you set up those fields as a category are now showing the selected value as a category or as a measure. Sounds a little bit maybe abstract if you never tried this out. So let's set up a very simple example. So what we are having here is, again, the standard AdventureWorks part. And what we now want to do is we want to say, I want, depending on my customer choice, allow the customer to select something by city, country, region, or state province. What I'm doing here is, after I activated the preview feature, of course, so for everybody who's not aware of this, under File, Options, you can activate preview features, and field parameters is one of them. I can create a new parameter of the type fields, and I name this parameter customer locale, and I select the fields I want to choose: city, country, region, state, province, for example. And I can already say from the beginning that I want to that I want to add a slicer to the current page. So what is done in the background? I have a new calculated table, which is called like the field parameter. What I see in live is the column customer locale, and this column is also added to a slicer. And if I now add a new table to my page, I can use this customer locale as a column inside my table. And I can take the total sales amount as a measure, for example, also in the table. And now I can play around with the slicer and can say, I only want to see country, region, or I want to see state, province, or I want to see the city, or I want to see two of them. So I get the full flexibility of all of the, let's say, adjustable visuals that we wanted to see for quite a long time. And of course, I can do this for a complete page. And as I said, if you have, for example, a certain controlling view that you need for different categories or for different measures, you can just set up this view once, use several of those field parameters to exchange the fields you need. And by this, you can allow the user to really have a really user-friendly appearance and behavior and adjust the report according to their needs. And you, as well as a model designer and a report designer, have a lot more control, because by setting up the field parameters in the first place, the model designer can actually already decide which parameters should be available, should be used. And the report designer actually sets up the report pages and visuals to actually interact with those field parameters. So it's actually a big benefit for both of them. The other topic I just want to show before I forget it later on, I mentioned, and that is something which is quite interesting, I mentioned that you can actually create to the SQL endpoint of a data mart. And that is exactly what I did here. So the columns that you're seeing, the sales, for example, with the measures and so on, are coming from the data mart that I pre-created. And to find the data mart at the moment is a bit tricky, because if you're looking at the data tab, you're seeing the get data you're used to. And if you're looking for data mart here, you most probably won't find it. So let's open the get data and look for mart. No data mart here. But if you look closely, there is a new icon called Data Hub. And Data Hub is similar to the Data Hub or connected to the Data Hub that you see in the service. And this is giving you an overview of all the data sets, data flows, and data marts that you're connected to. And you will see the data mart here. And by assigning this, you can actually just connect to a data mart, which is connecting to the SQL endpoint in the end. Okay, so field parameters, really, really valuable. I really recommend Gerhard's blog on this because this is showing a much more advanced usage of field parameters, but I think it's a very interesting feature. The next one is also very interesting. This will be a very, very short demo. So I phrased it as next level of paginated reports, which, well, looks a bit weird. So let's just start with the demo and get back to the slides afterwards. So we are going back to the service and we're going to a different user right now because so far we were using, we were using my premium per user account. And now let's get back to another user in the same tenant. And as you can see, this user has just a pro license. And what I can do now is I can go to one of my data sets, and I now have the possibility under create a report to create a report type as formatted table. If I'm doing this, I'm getting a report design view. And for example, I can say I want to take my customer name and customer key, for example, first name and last name. I just get a table. I now could format the table however I want. So I have full formatting options. And afterwards, what I can do is I can save this report. And when I go back to the workspace after the report is saved, is what I see here is the report I now saved is a paginated report. So still, it's just a formatted table. It's something which is pretty useful to allow users to easily export data if we want users to easily export data. But it allows us to let users easily export data from a single table inside a data set. And it's creating a paginated report, so we could always redo this whole experience. But if we are thinking more closely on what this actually means is, well, what did we just do? We created a paginated report on the web with the web editor, something which we weren't able to do before. And, well, if you remember which license type I used to create a paginated report, might be interesting to think about this. Okay, next feature. While we were talking about exportable formatted tables, another really cool new feature to allow you to use the data from your data sets in a more useful way is the Execute DAX API. The Execute DAX API is a REST API that allows you to run DAX queries against the data set and consume the outcome. So by this, you could, for example, use the business logic that you set up in your dataset and consume the results in Azure Data Factory, in any kind of application, anything else. And the coolest feature, at least in my estimation, is that if you're not as familiar with REST APIs as probably most of you are, the team also used the opportunity to make a Power Automate action available for this as well. Looking at the Power Automate action, just to quickly show this, what you can do here, and I will just show you the prepared flow. You can just set up a new flow, or let's just do a quick new flow. So we start from blank. We want to trigger manually. Then we are we're looking for and I'm really bad at finding the right thing. So I really should have remembered how this is called. A DAX delivery. I'm pretty sure it was there before. It would be really nice if I could just remember how to do this. So let's get back. Okay, let's look into my flows. As you can see, I'm not really working with Power Automate that often. So let's go to the edit view. That run a query. It wasn't with DAX. That was my issue. I'm sorry. So you can trigger a flow. You can use the Power Automate action, which allows you to run a DAX query against the dataset. In this action, you can actually connect to a workspace, to a dataset, define your query text, have some advanced options like nulls included, or if you want an impersonation. And then, for example, you can create, turn the result, so the JSON that is returned, into a CSV table and export it to a OneDrive for Business. That's what I just did as a preparation. And what I could do here is actually export the file and open the file, for example, with Notepad, for example, or Word, whatever, Notepad++. And what you will see as a result is just a single CSV file with all the data from my currency table in this case. So it's maybe not the most advanced feature to look at, but it's really useful. And yeah, getting back to the question, yes, you definitely could use it in an Azure function. You could use it in an Azure function or in ADF, in a pipeline. Yes. Another API topic, but this time from a manageability perspective, is the new enhanced refresh API. So you already had a refresh API that allowed you to trigger a refresh of a full Power BI dataset, which would have been a manual synchronous refresh, as I said, of a full dataset. And you didn't have any additional advantages like cancellation. The new refresh API is adding the functionality to actually trigger a asynchronous refresh. So you're actually having the same reliable refresh experience that you're already used to if you were working with Azure Analysis Services. So it's more like feature parity with the refresh in Azure Analysis Services. In addition, it allows you to actually refresh individual tables or partitions, which is also necessary to allow you to consume or use the incremental refresh policies or create your own incremental refresh or partial refresh solutions. And something which we all waited for quite a long time is if you're using this asynchronous refresh approach, you now also have the opportunity to actually cancel those refreshes. So that's something which was missing for Power BI from a manageability viewpoint for quite a time, and this is now available. I won't demo this. There is good blog posts, good documentation on this. The only thing I want to highlight is please make sure you can use the same API to perform a synchronous refresh, or if you add certain parameters and you have to at least one of those parameters, and that is well documented, you can use the reliable refresh option, and then you can perform the cancellation. But this is really only working for the asynchronous refresh. So it's important to really read the documentation on this. The next part is something where I will save my voice for a bit because it's a strategy topic. So we were all wondering, how about Azure Analysis Services? So we all know Power BI is a superset for analysis services. So our strategy, our recommendations is mostly to say, well, consider going to Power BI directly instead of going to Azure Analysis Services. Please let me make sure and confirm. It's not like AAS is deprecated, or there are any plans to remove AAS at the time being. But also, let's be honest, there is not that much investment into Azure Analysis Services as there is into Power BI. So if you want to be at the top level of feature availability, Power BI is the way to go. And well, who could better tell how we could now make the migration from Azure Analysis Services to Power BI as easy as possible than Mr. Clicky Clicky Draggy Droppy. I put the link to this build conference video into the meeting notes. It's just a 15 minutes video, but it is really amazing. So I can really recommend to do this. But just to show you this, you will have the opportunity to have a built-in migration experience. So you can connect to an Azure Analysis Server, you can choose a model that you want to migrate. You can either create a new workspace in Power BI to migrate to or add to an existing workspace. You can then migrate the model automatically. And what is most important in my point of view, you will have a redirect option. So all the existing reports, all the existing endpoints, all the existing pivot tables in Excel will keep working because you will have a redirect and actually something which will allow you to change the connections in a sustainable way. So if this is a scenario which is interesting to you, I can really highly recommend to watch that video later on. As I said, the link is available in the resources at the end. Okay, so with this, I'm a little bit ahead of time, or almost quite good in time, because the last feature I want to show you is a pretty quick one. Yeah, as the title says, sometimes it's the small things, the small changes that really stick to your mind and really help doing things. And this one is something which I really, really love, and it's canvassing. So if you remember, for example, delivering presentations or seeing presentations on Power BI before, a lot of things people were doing a lot. I can remember I did this, was like moving in panes and sliders and some such to actually make more space to see something, and then still it wasn't big enough and we started using Zoom it and whatever. Now we have Canvas Zoom, which easily allows us to actually inside the canvas zoom in and out and look and really experience the features that we want to see best. And it's such a small thing, but I'm so grateful it's there. So with this, I'm done with my presentation. Just to get back to the slides, it's time for Q&A, and just to highlight, there's all the resources I referred to, the most important build videos I would really recommend to see. This one, the future of enterprise semantic models, is the one where we talk about the migration experience, for example. With this, I don't know if there are any questions which I didn't answer because I cannot put my focus on one thing at a time. I'm sorry. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
We had a slight discussion, me and Mark, about was there a note in the black box of the data mart slide that said you cannot use Power BI embedded to use to try the data mart thing?
For the time being, you're absolutely right. For the time being, data marts is not supported for Power BI embedded.
Is cool. That, Gabi, is that because Power BI embedded doesn't use Gen 2 at the moment, or is it maybe another reason?
It's definitely another reason, because
okay.
Embedded is using Gen 2.
Okay.
But it's just there are some slight differences between the embedded and the capacity experience just right now. And I think we all agree that the not currently is showing the direction we are all thinking this will go. But yeah, it's at the moment you cannot use it for embedded. But let's be honest, it's the really first version of data marts. There are some things that definitely will benefit from improvement and bug fixing for the time for the future. So let's wait for those.
So apparently, from what you've said and what we've looked at, data marts are stored within a fully managed Azure SQL DB. Right. Is the endpoint to this SQL DB exposed so that we can connect to this from other services and consumers?
To my knowledge, not at the moment. I don't know if the roadmap on this is already clear. For the time being, that's not possible.
Embedding of live data, is it only for PowerPoint, or will I be able to embed it into other things, web pages, Windows applications, custom screensaver, and so on?
So using Power BI embedded or Premium, you already would be able to do this just right now. It was just PowerPoint. So you were able to embed in web pages and similar stuff. This is something which was possible before. You weren't able to do it for Power BI. For PowerPoint. So that is actually meant to close this gap. But you were able to. Let me get back to the service. You were able to create embed links for your reports that could be used in websites, portals, and different things already before. This is a standard feature. So the embedding in PowerPoint is actually just the new one.
Cool.
Right, Mikhail, do you want to jump to the next one?
Yeah, we can do another developer question about SSAS, cubes, online, Power BI. Is the execute DAX feature going to replace XML API endpoints? Or are all features showing up everywhere as REST APIs in the future?
I'm very sure there is no plan to replace XMLA endpoints, which are, in my understanding, a completely different beast or completely different animal, because they are also used for data definition. So you can do all the refresh administrative parts and create data sets and something like this, which definitely is not possible with the API. And I'm not really aware that there is, well, there is APIs for a lot of things, but I really cannot imagine that this will be meant to replace XMLA. To my understanding, even the APIs are using the XMLA endpoints in the background. So it's really just, let's say, a comfortable function to use REST APIs to not have to learn about XMLA, but it's not something which will replace XMLA.
So I think we have a final question.
Yeah, let's get to that. Yeah, sorry for this one, slightly off topic, but since you've talked about quite a few new REST API bits and pieces of functionality, are we likely to have, or do we already have, a full Power BI REST API so that I could, for instance, dynamically create reports and visuals, or even write tests? So from a test perspective, I'm kind of thinking about the Selenium style automation.
Short answer is no.
Okay.
That was a wonderful answer.
Yeah, she listened to me waffling for 10 minutes and gave me a very succinct answer, so that was great.
No.
Ian says it depends would be a better answer, but I will go for no.
I agree, but I'm off my consulting times for a moment. No, but yeah, to make it a bit clearer, there is API support for a lot of topics already, and we assume that there will be more and more APIs for the future. So, for example, there is API support for deployment pipelines now, which hasn't been there quite a while ago or a short while ago. And as I said, we assume that there will be additional API support in the future. It's hard for me to imagine that there will be a full API-based option to replace everything else, but that might just be my lack of imagination. I'm not aware of a plan to do all of this, and let's be honest, as we're actually developing more and more new features, it's always that we're doing the features first, and in a lot of cases doing the UI work first to make this available, especially from a self-service perspective. And APIs very often come later on, even if we use them internally in some cases. It's not something which is always available from the start. And there is some things which are no APIs available for. So I will always think there is some functionality in Power BI, or there will always be at least some new functionality in Power BI that will not have API support. So I wouldn't bet on full API support for everything, but I think we can bet on more and more API support in the future.
Cool. So the future will be exciting even for Power BI, as for every product we have. I say that was the last of our question before the summer. Thanks to everybody that joined, and a big thanks to Gabi.
Thanks a lot for all your time, the good questions, and I hope some of my most valued features are also interesting to you. So thanks a lot for having me, and have a good summer break. Have a good time, everybody, and hope to talk to you soon.